the dawn of the 4th century AD, the times of peace and prosperity are long gone. The Romans, once masters of the world, had grown weak after years of comfort, and as Rome grew weaker, her enemies noticed. The barbarians of the north no longer hesitated to pillage deep into imperial territory. The resurgent empires of the east burnt Roman cities one after the other, while power-hungry generals were turned into vicious warlords fighting for control. Thousands died and millions suffered. Many in their despair found hope in false prophets and mystic cults. Through the chaos, Diocletian, a powerful but harsh man, finally consolidated power in the empire. Despite his wisdom, he caused more harm than good by dividing the once mighty state to be ruled by 4 emperors, men desperate to unite the empire under their own banner. Caught in the struggle for power were 2 boys, Constantine and Maxentius, sons of emperors themselves, were raised as political hostages by Diocletian and his new right-hand man, the barbaric Galerius, in order to secure the loyalty of their fathers. The boys lived in fear, as Galerius unfolded his brutality on the common people, especially over Christians. But as the boys grew in age and in strength, they decided to take matters in their own hands and escaped from the jaws of their oppressors. With a joint effort, they both claimed their positions as Caesars, Constantine in Gaul and Britannia, and Maxentious in Rome and Africa. Despite their noble intentions, a series of unfortunate events led the 2 young men to set the world on fire once again. Like Romulus and Remus, the confrontation of the 2 former brothers would unfold in Rome in the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. Rome, Maxentious had fought tooth and nail to have the right to rule over the Eternal City. He repelled 2 massive invasions by the Barbarian Galerius, even when outnumbered. Everything looked set for a glorious reign, one of those reigns that can start a dynasty. But his plans were soon cut short. His son, Romulus, died at a young age. His grief was unparalleled. Once a charismatic young leader, Maxentius had now become a superstitious despot. Great misery plagued the Eternal City. The Christians, now a big part of the populace, lived in constant fear of persecution, but their numbers had become so large that they were now represented with even official hierarchies. The Pope, a man named Miltiades, was their spiritual leader, but still, they worshipped God inside the catacombs, hidden from plain sight, and often facing starvation and disease, as the empire descended into more and more chaos. Meanwhile, the elites lived in a state of constant lust and plenty. To justify their actions, they would seek answers from the old Roman gods fused with mystic cults of the East. Manichaeism, Egyptian gods, and Greek deities had been combined together into a vile form of idol-worshipping, a common religion where material goods and the veneration of the flesh were of utmost importance. Maxentius, ignoring the chaos around him, had only one thing in mind: power, but his position was at stake, as he could feel that he was no longer a welcome leader of his own people. The charismatic Constantine was approaching, and even if his forces were smaller, his charisma could ruin Maxentius' advantage. And so he descended into the crypt, where the keepers of the Sibylline books awaited in the shadows. These ancient texts, written by the hands of priestesses under Jupiter's possession, claimed to hold the secrets of all that was, is, and will be. It was the duty of the keepers to reveal the future to those who sought it. For Maxentius, the prophecy was clear. Tomorrow, the enemy of Rome will be crushed outside her walls. Maxentius thus assembled his army of sellswords and oathbreakers, the once mighty Praetorians. Now, guided by the ancient spirits, it was the time to annihilate Constantine and bring all the West under his rule. It takes strong men to ensure peace, but it requires a real legend to take responsibility over the future of the entire empire. Such a burden was bestowed upon the shoulders of Constantine. Having escaped from the corrupt court of Diocletian, having seen the depravity of the men in power, he had sworn not to become one more self-serving ruler. After securing his father's domains, he took up the sword and became one with the soldiers, one more man in the ranks of the legions. In his struggle, he was not alone. On his side, he had his mother Eleni, a devout Christian. It was from her that he learned humility and respect for the plight of the common man. but he was not meant to be left out of the imperial affairs for long. One cold night, an assassin's blade came close to claim his life. The man behind the order was no other than Maxentious. It was now evident that Maxentius was now plotting against him. Dark clouds were once more gathering on the horizon, and Constantine had to act decisively to safeguard what he had been building all those years. Scouts informed Constantine that a huge Maxentian force was assembling in Italy, composed of Praetorians and Clibanarii, preparing to invade and usurp his realm. Thus, Constantine called upon the veterans once more to protect his people and to bring an end to the tyranny that had plagued the empire. His plan was to avoid bloodshed with a bold and fast strike against Maxentius, directly on the heart of his domains, on the city of Rome itself, before Maxentius could muster his forces. This task was overambitious. Maxentius had more soldiers and wealth, and the Aurelian walls of Rome at his side. A few miles outside Rome, the situation had become desperate. Nevertheless, the army set camp and the men lay to rest, as it could be their last sleep. But Constantine was restless. He knew that everything he stood for now hung in a thread. Trying to clear his thoughts, he takes a moment to rest. He closes his eyes, and before long he finds himself asleep. He dreams of the fate of the world, lest he lose, and of a vision that would change the course of history forever. As he is standing alone on a vast and dark plain, a sign appears in the night sky, the symbol of the Christians, the Chi Rho, and from the heavens, the voice of God himself. With this sign, you shall conquer. Constantine wakes up with a burst of energy. He knows exactly what he has to do. Wasting no time, he rushes towards the soldiers with a clear command. Mark the Chi Rho upon your shields. Tomorrow we will be victorious. No matter the situation, he now knew that he had God's favor on his side. It was finally time to realize his destiny. The fate of the world was on his hands. As one more day was rising in Rome, the weary dwellers were preparing to face another day of hardship. The bravest of them, believing in the rumors that a liberator of the people was on his way to depose the tyrant ruling over the city, climbed the walls to check if they were indeed true. They couldn't believe their eyes. Constantine was here, challenging Maxentius for the eternal city and for the right to rule all Romans. This would not be a regular siege, however. Maxentius, confident in his overwhelming numbers, led his vast host across the Tiber River, eager to engage Constantine's army. But Constantine had been waiting patiently on the other side. His men, weary from the march, but resolute, once the enemy drew closer, raised their new banner high, the Chi Rho. Maxentius did not flinch at the sight. With a cold command, he unleashed his elite Clibanarii, the heavily armored cavalry who had broken so many foes before, their charge like a wave of iron and steel. But the experienced veterans of Constantine's army, tempered by countless battles, stood firm. In their eyes, they were not fighting another vain civil war, but for the future of their souls, with God on their side. Standing in close formation and bracing for the charge, they broke the Clibanari's advance with ease, as they had done against the Frankish cavalry under Constantius. The battle was far from over. As the dust settled, Constantine's troops, stepping over man and horse alike, advanced on Maxentius' Praetorians. Both sides threw their pilla and then clashed against each other. A brutal melee erupted, a clash of flesh, iron, and will, as Constantine's battle-hardened warriors tore into Maxentius' Praetorians. As time passed, however, the fatigue of the march caught on to the veterans, with the battle soon turning into a slugfest, both sides unable to gain a clear advantage. It was at that moment that Constantine spotted Maxentius in the field. Seizing the opportunity to turn the tide, he rushed towards Maxentius, who in the confusion of the battle was left unguarded. The two brotherly friends, who had been training together for years, now fought each other for the destiny of the empire. They clashed in combat like Achilles and Hector. Suddenly, in a shift strike, Constantine, holding the will of God in his hands, strikes Maxentius on his arm. Maxentius, at the sight of his blood dripping through his armor, lost heart and fled in terror. His men, seeing the deplorable state of their once great leader, and knowing that he was no longer the favorite of the gods, lost faith quickly, and thus started retreating en masse. What was once a battle turned into an unorganized rout. Soldiers stumbled over each other in desperation, trying to reach the other side of the now flooded river over the pontoon bridge. In the frenzy, Men caring only about their promised gold were trampled and others drowned. Maxentious was no longer a leader, but just one more struggler trying to reach the other side, his fate lost in the unforgiving waters of the Tiber. And as the sun finally sank beneath the horizon, the battlefield cleared, and only the army of Christ remained standing. After the bloody battle, the city of Rome opened its gates to Constantine. The occasion was one to be celebrated. The civil war that had brought much hardship to the empire was now reaching its closure. But even more importantly, the masses of Christians living in fear could now for the first time openly profess their faith with no fear of persecution. Many of them tried to reach out to the new emperor of Rome, seeing in his figure the first king of the Christians and the Romans. Not overtaken by the admiration of the people, he knew that now that power had come into his hands, major changes had to be made to the administration of the empire and its people. First, the Christians would now be a recognized religion across Constantine's domains, and their leader, Pope Miltiades, would have a permanent residence from where he could address the affairs of the faith. Next, he sought to abolish the Praetorian Guard, a unit that had become no more than a gang of mercenaries, loyal only to their pockets. Constantine was thus set to secure his destiny and transform the empire. Only one more obstacle left to complete his vision. Clouds were gathering in the east. Licinius, a barbarian commander, had risen to control the empire's most wealthy provinces, imposing his brutality on half of the Roman world. The struggle between Constantine and this new formidable opponent would be one to make or break Constantine's glorious ascent.